Welcome to My Life Lessons featuring stories from immigrants. Today I have a very special guest with me, Gust Kraras. Welcome to the project. Gust, if you would take a moment, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself.
My name is Gust Kraras. I came to this country in 1938. I belonged to that class of immigrants that came in between the old immigrants in the 10s and 20s and 30s, and then the ones after the war. There were very few of us, but the reason for that being the Great Depression, of course. And that's where was I came at that point. I came directly to Reading.
You came directly to Reading.
I came directly because I had a brother here who had a business in Reading. And in fact, that was my first taste of American business and American food. He had a big hot dog place here on Penn Street, on the next block here. I don't know how many of you know the history of the hot dogs here, because the original hot dogs, of course, was in Coney Island. Well, these people here, between 7th and 9th Street, there were at one time 5 hot dog places. Well, one was the Coney Island, the other was the famous Coney Island, the other was the original Coney Island, and so forth and so on. And what impressed me, because I was never aware of something like that, in fact it would be impressive even today, they were selling so many hot dogs on Saturday night that the Fraunhofer Bacon Company had actually parked a truck in front of the place to supply them with rolls. There was no way they could make enough rolls unless you get the, and they had hot dogs piled up high, all 4 of them on Saturday night.
Oh my
That
goodness.
impressed me. Can you imagine to somebody that was not familiar with anything yet?
Right, right.
So
Well,
that's what was my first taste in business and in food and in work.
and your first impression. Well, let's go into the project. What was your original reason for emigrating to the United States?
Well, my father was here since 1905. He'd come in here and he'd have work here. He'd work many places in this country. Whenever there was an opportunity for a business, he'd do it. For a while, when he first came in, there was no availability anywhere. And he went down to Muskogee, Oklahoma, where they had the new oil field. So he and a friend put some boards up, make it like a table, and he'd cook for the oil workers. That was his original work in 1805. After that, he'd come in here, work. He always very, very aggressive. He'd work, make some money, come back to Greece, have another child or 2, come back again. He did that 7 times. And the reason is that the family never moved over. It was that, according to the old tradition, the younger generation have to take care of the older ones. And both his parents and my mother's parents were alive, and my mother had to take care of them. In the meantime, start having kids too, so it was difficult to let the old people go, don't pay any attention to them, and then move the whole family. So my father never ever gave a thought of bringing a family over. So he'd do as I mentioned, he'd come over, have a kid or 2, come back here, make some money, go back, the money run out, come back again.
So why did you come?
I was too young then. My older brother came here when I was born, same year in fact, because that was the only way to the credits. And then he came here, and by the way, he lived all his life in Reading. He had a family in Reading, and he had business in Reading. But we lost contact more or less, because the communications were not like they are now. There was no telephone easy to use. Of course, no radios or anything like that. So for all intents and purposes, we lost my brother. And my mother did not take it well. So when the question came up if I should come up, she didn't like it neither.
Okay.
Because it was actually you lose your kids. So that's why I didn't come any earlier. Now, when I was in 1938, when I was 17 years old, and I decided I should come here because there were no opportunities left in Greece. There were nothing. You had to do either manual work or something. So I wanted to. So I convinced my dad. My father was in Mississippi here at that point to bring me over.
So you were 17. You were 17 years old when you came over.
17 years old.
Where do you find your greatest inspiration being here in the United States?
Well, one thing I realized very early, that this country gives you all kind of opportunities. I mean, there is no such a thing that you're stuck in a hole. You can proceed and you can work for yourself, so long as you're willing to work. That's one thing I learned from my father and my brother and everybody else. Willing to work. If you're willing to work, this country gives you all the opportunity. For somebody like me that came from a little village and I had better than average education as far as it went for Greece then at that time. But of course, not up to what it should be in this country. But nevertheless, and to have the life that I had, that proves that this country offers you anything and everything. All you got to do is work for it.
What were some of your earliest experiences when you came here? Did you fight in the war? What happened?
When I first came here, I stayed here for a couple of months only. The reason being that in Brenning there was a sizable, as it is now, Greek community. So the language was not a problem because I could communicate in Greek with anybody. But my father had a business, as I mentioned, in Mississippi, in a little town that there were no Greeks at all, just him and me. So to throw me all the way to Mississippi without any language would have been a problem. So I stayed here about 2-3 months to get myself acquainted. Then I went down with my father in Mississippi. Fast forward, eventually I wanted to continue school, so I ended up in Nashville, Tennessee, because Nashville, Tennessee had good night schools those years, the best. I went there and I was working during the day. I found a job in a restaurant, and then I'd go to school 5 hours every night. So that went through until Pearl Harbor. Now, in the meantime, I accepted the fact that I'm going to be in America, this will be my home. So the day after Pearl Harbor, I thought that I had to help this country wherever I can. So I went to volunteer. Only the recruiting sergeant wouldn't take me because I was not an American citizen yet. At that time, it took 5 years. You had to be here 5 years, got through a whole long process to become an American citizen. But the recruiting sergeant advised me to go to the draft board and ask him to advance my number. That I did. A few months later, I was in the service. I went to the first assigned to the field artillery for basic training. And then I found out there was a Greek battalion formed in Camp Carson, Colorado. And the battalion was organized through special order of Franklin Roosevelt. We still have been figuring out as to why they did the battalion. It was mostly politics more than army. But anyhow, we were highly trained. That 7 or 8 months that I was with the Greek battalion, very highly trained, way above what the average army would train. But then the OSS was organized. The OSS, if I take a minute to explain about the OSS, up to that point, up to a year before that point, because to be exact, this country had no intelligence service. They stopped in the early 1920s. They didn't have, after the First World War, they didn't have an intelligence service whatsoever. In fact, Henry L. Stimson, who was Secretary of State in the late 20s, he made the famous statement that gentlemen do not read other gentlemen's mail. So he disbanded all the intelligence services. We didn't need spies, so to speak. So here we come, Second World War was starting, and we had no intelligence service. Well, the British always had an intelligence service and always had the best. Well, the man in charge of the British intelligence service in North America, with his office was in Canada, of course, you couldn't have it here. He tried to convince leaders in this country that you need an intelligence service. He happened to be friends with General Donovan. I'm sorry, I gotta go from one story to the other, but you have to go to explain the whole thing.
That's okay. That's okay.
General Donovan was an officer of the famous 79th of New York during the First World War. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a movie made about him. He was really a sharp guy. After the war, he went into the law in Wall Street. He made money, but he kept his fingers and his contacts in the government. So when this Britisher needed somebody to talk to, he heard about Donovan, calls Donovan up because he says, your country needs an intelligence service. Well, Donovan was a roommate of Franklin Roosevelt in school. So he had an opening. So he contacted President Roosevelt and said, this and this is the idea, we should start an intelligence service. And Roosevelt said, fine, you start it. So General Donovan became in charge of the OSS, more or less to start an intelligence service. And when they put in the word that we're looking for recruits, out of the first 75 recruits for that intelligence service, 56 of them were all from the Ivy League schools. 56 out of 75, so you can see what kind of quality of people they were looking for, and they got them. Then they established it. They got the intelligence service going with Donovan in charge. He organized it real well. Well, right down the road, as they were going along, they decided that in addition to pure intelligence service, that they can organize what they referred to at that time as operational groups, OGs, operational groups, that would do a lot of sabotage work, some intelligence work, and so forth in different parts of the occupied Europe. And that's where we come in. As I told you, I was in the Greek Battalion. Mm-hmm. The OSS came to the Greek Battalion. They wanted a few volunteers. Ended up the whole battalion volunteer. Eventually, actually signed up. Out of 700, 300 and some of us signed up. Then we had to go through a lot of mental and physical tests before we were accepted. They accepted 200 of us. And that's how I became a member of the OSS, which eventually, with very heavy and really heavy training, we ended up to go to occupied Europe.
How did that experience and all of that training, that all of the specialized training, did that serve you well going forward after the war? How did you apply that training?
After the war?
Yes.
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
I mean, other than the fact, one thing that the Army teaches you, taught to us then, and I'm sure they're teaching it today, is discipline.
Yes.
You learn. So the one thing that we learn is discipline. And mine, with the difficulty in language, it made me learn better. It learned me to communicate better. You see, so that training helped me later on.
Gust, what has been your greatest life lesson being here? Your greatest life lesson?
The statement that I repeated, I said at the beginning, with the life lesson that I learned in this country, that you can do anything, you can be anything if you're willing to work.
How did you apply that here? How did you apply that life lesson in the United States?
Well, I think for an immigrant that I come in here at that time, didn't even have much schooling at the beginning. I accomplished a lot. I established a family. I established business. So there you are. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So my own belief was work hard, and we accomplished it. And then my kids come up, and Chris came in with the idea with the tours and everything. Up to that point, I had motels and restaurants already. where would you get all that if it was not for the opportunity that this country gives you?
Do you stay connected to your traditions from your country? How do you do that? How do you stay connected to your traditions?
Well, the traditions, more or less, as the time goes by, the traditions are fading away, slowly but surely. I mean, right now I was thinking about that the way over. What would I say? What traditions I have, with the exception of barbecuing a lamb on Easter, that is rarity. I don't know what else traditions we have. We have some within the family, our own traditions. Like we get together and we make some, besides the traditional cooking. But we try to instill to next generation that we came from an important country, like everybody does. You know, if you came from England, England was important. But in Greece, we felt as though we were a little bit from what Greece had given to the world. So we try to instill some of that to some of our younger generations so they can remember it. But keeping many of the Greek traditions, not many.
What has brought you the greatest joy living here in the United States?
Seeing my family. I got 26 members in my family. When I see all 26 of them together, and we do get together often, that's the greatest pleasure. Nothing else equals that. Nothing equals if they give you a bank full of money, that will equal to that. So money has nothing to do with it. But the pleasure to see all this, from Chris being the oldest, down to have a great-grandson, he was 5 yesterday. So they're all together. When I see them every Saturday at noon, they all come into my house. It can be anywhere. It might be 10 this week, next week it will be 20. But they all, Saturdays, they've got to get in my house. That's the greatest pleasure.
If you could describe in one sentence what being here means to you, that you could tell your children and your grandchildren, what would that be?
What I appreciate in this country is that give me the opportunity to succeed, and gives an opportunity to everyone to educate themselves, like all my children, my grandchildren, everybody's got college graduate, something that we would never think when I was growing up. So this country has given us that opportunity, and that's all I'm looking for, and that's all I'm advising everybody. Take advantage of what this country offers.
This project is very, very important, and we need to learn from you. And it has been a privilege to sit here today for this short amount of time and just get to talk to you. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.